Thanks to you for tuning in. I'm live tonight in Las Vegas. Breaking news tonight, the White House slamming a new attempt to gut Obamacare in the courts. Today, the Supreme Court announced it'll rule on a lawsuit challenging a key part of the Affordable Care Act. If conservatives get their way, millions of people could lose their ability to pay for insurance. The White House ripped the lawsuit today, saying, quote, the ACA is working. These lawsuits won't stand in the way of Affordable Care Act and the millions of Americans who can now afford health insurance because of it. This lawsuit reflects just another partisan attempt to undermine the Affordable Care Act and to strip millions of American families of tax credits the Congress intended for them to have. The court's announcement came while President Obama met with congressional leaders from both sides of the aisle and made it clear he's willing to work with members of Congress on key issues.
What we've seen now for a number of cycles is that the American people just want to see work done here in Washington. I think they're frustrated by the gridlock. They'd like to see more cooperation. And I think all of us have the responsibility, me in particular, to try to make that happen. And so this gives us a good opportunity to explore where we can make progress on behalf of the people who sent us here.
He knows the American people are sick of gridlock, but Republicans still keep talking about how they'll still try to get rid of the health care law.
Every one of my members thinks that Obamacare was a huge legislative mistake.
And so the House, I'm sure, at some point next year, will move to repeal Obamacare.
The individual mandate, people hate it. So I think we will be addressing that issue.
The American people have made it clear they're not for Obamacare. They asked all those Democrats who lost their elections Tuesday night.
Except the American people weren't making that point. Nearly 60% of the people who voted on Tuesday said their vote was not about the law. In fact, less than 1/3 of them even saw ads about it leading up to the election. The American people know this fight should be over. It's about time conservative lawmakers and judges accept that. Joining me now are Joan Walsh and E.J. Dionne. Thank you both for being here.
Good to be with you, Reverend.
Joan, let me go to you first. They're still talking about repeal, and we're seeing another fight at the Supreme Court. Do you get a sense of deja vu?
Well, they're not going to give up on this, Reverend Al. We know that. But on the other hand, I want to tell our viewers not to despair about the Supreme Court. I could be wrong about this, but I do want to say it's terrible that they took it. Lower courts had ruled against the plaintiffs. Lower courts did not want this to go through. It was not a kind of split decision situation where you do see the court get involved. So it's bad news that they got involved, but it only takes 4 justices to take a case like this, okay? So it doesn't mean that there are going to be 5 votes to strip the subsidies. It's horrible because this is essentially, there's a typo. There's the equivalent of a typo in the law, and that's what these lawsuits have been about.
But it's horrendous that they would even use a typo to even put millions of people at risk.
Horrendous.
You know, EJ, this challenge to the health care law goes after the subsidies for people who bought insurance in the federal marketplace. Next year, 37 states will use the federal marketplace, and by 2016, 7.3 million people in those states will be getting subsidies. And you, EJ, have written that the law falls apart without the subsidies, I'm quoting you to you, which go to its central purpose, providing insurance for those who cannot afford it. So is this lawsuit about undermining the whole law, EJ?
Yes, this lawsuit is designed to gut the whole law. And the reading of the law that this lawsuit is based on is absolutely nonsensical because Congress could not possibly have intended to write a law that says what these folks who are trying to kill Obamacare claim it says. And very recently, principal authors of the law, Senators Harkin and Wyden and Congressman Levin and Miller and Waxman, wrote a long op-ed piece in the Washington Post saying, no way we intended the law to work the way these guys claim it does. We intended those subsidies to be in there whether states opted into Obamacare or not. And so I am a little more worried about the Supreme Court than Joan is. I surely hope she's right. But the fact that they took it suggests that there were already 4 votes on that court who want to throw it out because they didn't have to take this case. And most of the judges who have ruled on it said there's no way you can read the law the way this lawsuit from the conservatives claims you want to. So I'd hate to see conservative judges usurp the political system, the democratic system, and the Congress wouldn't even have to repeal it because this would make a mess of the law.
Joan, you know, there was the meeting today that we showed of the president meeting with congressional leaders saying that people want to see the gridlock broke and see people come together in some bipartisan way on things that will help Americans. We've heard from the Senator McConnell in a sort of conciliatory tone, and then right behind him, Boehner yesterday, who was much more harsh in his tone. What's the state now in Washington, as you read it, around potential bipartisan cooperation when you see the declaration of war again on the Affordable Care Act?
I'm very pessimistic. Excuse me, Rob. I'm really pessimistic. And I really feel that if they wanted to do something bipartisan in a bipartisan way, they would actually they could fix this reading error in the law. That would be a great olive branch to give the president. Excuse me, I've got a cold. But they're not going to do that. I think he's saying all the right things, but he's not going to get cooperation.
But, you know, EJ, and I'm going to talk about this more in my next segment, but, I mean, we're talking about millions of people here that need health care, and Republicans seem to not understand that the definition of compromise is not that you get everything you want. Compromise is not do what I say. Compromise is you give, I give, and let's come to a consensus.
Right. That's exactly right. And I am afraid I share Joan's view. I think that we're going to have the likelihood of comedy in Washington is about as great as my beating either Michael Jordan or President Obama in golf. You know, the signals that are coming out here, especially from Speaker Boehner, but also I think when you really listen to him carefully, Mitch McConnell, is that they want to fight the president. And on health care, there are actually a lot of things that Democrats and the president would be willing to do to make the Affordable Care Act better, some of which the Republicans might even be able to support. The good news here, I think, is that there are so many people now getting coverage. There are so many new advantages to people like, you know, no pre-existing conditions in this law, that if we really join the fight over the ACA again, I think that Americans will say, no, we don't want to repeal this. We want to make it better, but we don't want it to go away. So if the Republicans take on this fight, I think there's a real chance that they'll lose it as long as the courts allow the democratic system to operate.
You know, Joan, enough is enough. I mean, fine, they won an election. It was a big win for them. But now you have to govern. And the American people need health care. Yet a recent poll found 89% of people without health insurance didn't know open enrollment begins this month, November 15th to be exact. I mean, what do Democrats need to do to raise the awareness about the law?
I don't know that they can do it alone, Rev. This is the problem. I mean, we talked about this when the law went into effect last year. There was great enrollment. They surpassed their targets, but they didn't. Imagine if more people had known, and imagine if they hadn't had the Republican messaging, this law is going to fail, we're going to repeal it, it doesn't work. You really need both parties participating, and you don't have it. So that's my chief worry here, is that there's no way to counter. I shouldn't say no way, but it's very hard to counter this constant drumbeat that it's not working.
When the prescription what I was going to say is when the prescription drug benefit went into effect under President Bush, a lot of Democrats didn't like the form it was in and voted against it, but they were actually encouraging people to get this benefit.
Right.
They knew it would be good, even though they didn't think it was in the ideal form. It would help people out. And you wish that for civic reasons, the Republicans would say, well, we didn't vote for this law, but it's really good that people get health insurance.
Right.
But, EJ, how do you explain what is different about these Republicans? I mean, explain what is different about this.
Well, I think the Republican Party has been on a journey toward the right where they threaten to fall off the cliff. I mean, think about Mitch McConnell. He started his political career working for a Republican named John Sherman Cooper, who was an incredibly progressive Republican, a real champion of civil rights. And that was Mitch McConnell's past. And Mitch McConnell himself has made this journey over to the right. Boy, would I wish that Mitch McConnell would give us a great big surprise and go back to the John Sherman Cooper Mitch McConnell, but I don't think that's what we're going to see. All those kinds of progressive and moderate Republicans have gone away, and we've got a just fiercely anti-government Republican Party that really would like the government to shrink down and stop giving the kinds of help it gives to people.
Voting for failure. I mean, it is no way to govern and no way to move this country to where it needs to be. Joan, Walsh, EJ, Dionne, thank you both for your time tonight, and have a great weekend.
Thanks,
and you have a great weekend too, Reverend. Thanks.
Yeah. Coming up, a developing story tonight. President Obama sending 1,500 more troops to Iraq to help fight ISIS. Plus, who killed bin Laden? A controversy over who fired the deadly shot is erupting within the heroic SEAL Team 6. The Pentagon and other SEALs are furious. Why is this happening? And when it comes to the economy, Republicans have me wondering if they're on another planet. I'm taking them back to reality tonight. And is feminist a bad word? It's a growing trend with women celebrities. We'll debate that in Conversation Nation. Please stay with us. Big show tonight.